The challenge of the new millennium will be learning how to best protect ourselves from mind control.
Somehow, the average citizen thinks that his or her mind could never be manipulated, and yet every day we're manipulated by each other, we're manipulated by advertising. 1,000 things impact and manipulate us in different ways.
We're bombarded with messages from the media, the radio, the television, and from newspapers that shape our perceptions of the world.
This relentless yet subtle conditioning can develop without you even knowing it.
Watching television is a trance-like experience. You forget about the carpet, the curtains, and that you're sitting in a room, and you engage your experience directly into the television screen, so that whatever happens on the screen seems really real. You suspend belief in reality. If you don't take responsibility for what goes into your mind, somebody else will. Cult leaders, politicians, advertisers will all seek to implant their message in your mind, whether it's for your good or not.
The greatest battle of the 21st century will be a battle of the mind. And there are people who have power who want more power, and they do not want the public to know about mind control, its existence, or how it's implemented.
There is a body of information being used by government to control the way people think and act, and experiments are systematically designed to increase government's knowledge about that. This is the most threatening part of being a citizen in a democracy. When your government can manipulate how you vote and how you think, you no longer live in a democracy.
Well, you know that it's going to be alright. I think it's gonna be alright. Everything will always be alright when we go shopping.
What advertising has always wanted to do is not simply to suffuse the atmosphere, but to become the atmosphere. It wants us not to be able to find a way outside of the world that it creates for us.
It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What truth?
That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind.
That goes straight back in American history. You read the working class press in the mid-19th century, press published by artisans and what were called factory girls, young women from the farms working in the textile mills in eastern Massachusetts, which was the center of beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Their press was calling for, they said their theme was that those who work in the mills ought to own them. Wage labor, which was called wage slavery, was regarded by most Americans as not very different from slavery. Even the Republican Party regarded wage labor as just at best a preliminary to free labor, but intolerable because it's a kind of servitude. A large part of the northern population fighting the Civil War was fighting under that banner.
Last fall, while some people went shopping for new sweaters, the people of Peterborough went shopping for a new energy company.
Deregulation is giving the people the ability to choose.
I think that the town made a really good choice.
With Enron, we've seen energy rates cut between 15 and 18%.
You don't even know that there's a difference until you get your bill.
Nobody likes a monopoly, particularly in a place where the state motto is live free or die.
You can choose your neighbors, and soon you may choose your energy company. Enron.
I know I need to listen.
No one has imported the techniques and philosophy of market research into politics more successfully than Frank Luntz. His clients have been some of the most prominent Republican politicians of the last decade. There was the mayoral campaign for Rudolph Giuliani in 1993, his work for Silvio Berlusconi in Italy, and especially his collaboration with Newt Gingrich on the famous Contract with America, the document that ushered in the Republican Revolution in Congress.
If an electricity company stood up and said, we want to do it for your benefit, we want to do it for our benefit, we want to do it for everyone's benefit, and so we have a better approach.
Tonight, Luntz's client is not a candidate, but a Florida utility wanting to build public support for a change in how it's regulated on the environment.
I know that the public is very down on corporate America in general, and they're down on power companies. So what is the language? What is the information? What are the facts? What are the figures that would get Americans to say, you know what, my electricity company, it's okay?
On one hand, you have wind, which has no fossil fuels associated with it.
To get at his subjects' gut feelings, Luntz has them register their moment-by-moment responses to a speech by a power company executive.
Climbing, changing fuels.
But watching Luntz work, I couldn't help wondering, do the words he's found help the public see the issue more clearly, or do they disguise it? Is Luntz listening to us so his clients can give us what we want, or so he can figure out how to make us want what they have to sell?
The words work. The words apply to the policy. This is how we're going to sell it. And I'll be able to walk to this electricity company on Monday and be able to say to them, your policy makes sense, and here's the language to explain it. That was the eureka moment. When I watched people nod their heads, I watched them look to each other, and they were willing at this point to fight for this position. You're replacing the bad with the good. It's almost like in with
This is a guy who is merchandising ideas and merchandising a movement and merchandising a political party. And in many instances, the words that he says are the ones that resonate, are ones that obscure to some extent the issue.
Take the so-called death tax. When it was called the estate tax, most people supported it. But Luntz managed to turn public opinion against it simply by giving it an emotionally loaded new name.
For years, political people and lawyers, who, by the way, are the worst communicators, used the phrase estate tax. And for years, they couldn't eliminate it, but the public wouldn't support it because the word estate sounds wealthy. Someone like me comes around and realizes that it's not an estate tax, it's a death tax, because you're taxed at death. And suddenly, something that isn't viable achieves the support of 75% of the American people. It's the same tax, but nobody really knows what an estate is. But they certainly know what it means to be taxed when you die. I'd argue that is a clarification. That's not an obfuscation.
Luntz has admonished Republican politicians to talk about tax relief instead of tax cuts, and to replace the war in Iraq with the war on terror. He once told his party to speak of climate change, not global warming.
What is the difference? It is climate change. Some people call it global warming, some people call it climate change. What is the difference?
The Reagan administration, you really had a massive enterprise to control the public mind. In fact, when this was exposed during the Iran-Contra hearings, partially exposed, one high administration official described it as the most successful operation they carried out. He said it's the kind of operation that you carry out in enemy territory. And that expresses the attitude toward the population completely. The population is the enemy, and you've got to control enemy territory, and the way you do it is by very extensive public diplomacy, meaning propaganda.
Intelligent propaganda is not a propaganda that tells blatant lies. It's something where you try to show the good side of what you're supporting, and you don't tell about the negatives. You only tell about the positives, which is true, but it's only a half-truth. And then it makes it a half-lie, if you will.
It is told in the words and from the perspective of the power wielders, and with no view from outside the walls. And that's really, I think, in a nutshell, the problem with so much of the coverage in Washington, is that the habits of mind that inform it, the sympathies that inform it, are all with the people at the top, and not with the people outside the palace.
The biggest joke, I think, in Washington is the idea that the press has an adversarial relationship to the city it covers and to the class of politicians and bureaucrats that it covers, when in fact it is so far from their adversary, it's a component of their life. It's a vicarious member of the same club. The adversarial definition is part of the self-flattery, the self-adoration with which the press conceives of its role and justifies its role to the public, who, of course, would like to think that there was a watchdog instead of a lapdog in Washington. They aren't so lucky.